English 121, Day 16, MLA Style, from the Allen and Bacon Guide, pages 574 to 598. When using MLA Style, first be sure to be aware of the format for parenthetical citations. When executing a parenthetical citation, place the author's last name and the page number or numbers in parentheses immediately after the material being cited. Here you can see it comes after the quotation mark, but before the terminal period. If an attributive tag already identifies the author, give only the page reference in parentheses. Here you can see the author's last name is included in an author tag in text. Then, at the end of the sentence in parentheses, only the page number is necessary. If reliable page numbers were not available for this source, a parenthetical citation would not be needed at all. In longer passages of quoted and paraphrased material, once it is clear that the same author's material is being used repeatedly, you need only cite the page numbers in the parentheses. Here we see the author is introduced with an author tag at the beginning of the passage, then the author's name is used again in a parenthetical citation in a later sentence, and by the end, only the page number is necessary for this final quote because it's clear that only this one source is being used. Remember that parenthetical citations always precede the terminal period except in the block quote method. However, it will come after the closing quotation marks. If more than one work by the same author is used in your paper, include in the parenthetical an abbreviated version of the title following the author's names, as we see here. Then, in the work cited, you'll want to list both sources alphabetically by title. Notice that the author's name is only listed once. For the second citation, the name is replaced with 3 hyphens and a period. Also be aware, in addition to parenthetical citations, of the format for your works cited page. Here's an example. Be sure to list the words works cited centered at the top of the page. They do not need to be underlined, they do not need to be italicized or in bold. Just works cited. In your works cited, be sure to list all the sources that are mentioned in your paper. Do not mention sources that you read but decided not to use. Sources should be arranged alphabetically by author, or if there is no author, by the title, or whatever the first word of the citation is. Each citation should be flush left for the first line, with a hanging indent of 1/2 inch for all remaining lines. When 2 or more works by one author are cited, the works are listed alphabetically by title. For the second and all additional entries, type 3 hyphens and a period in place of the author's name. Finally, in addition to parentheticals and your works cited, be aware of common challenges or pitfalls that you might encounter when executing MLA style. One example is the use of indirect quotes. You may use a quotation that you have seen cited in one of your other sources. Whenever possible, find the quotation in its original source and cite that source directly. However, if you cannot find the original source, cite the source indirectly by using the term quoted in, or QTD period in, and list only the indirect source in your works cited. Here, the indirect source is Miller, and the direct source is Philip Johnson. So only Miller would appear in the works cited, and only Miller's name is included in the parenthetical. Johnson is introduced in an author tag. This is where author tags become really important to help you distinguish which information in the sentence comes from which source. In addition to indirect sources, be aware of how to cite in electronic articles. When downloading material from the web in text or HTML files, do not use the page numbers from your printouts because they will not be consistent from printer to printer and they will not reflect the true page numbers of the original source. This is where we get into the discussion of HTML sources versus PDF sources. PDFs are always preferable because they're a direct photocopy of the original source and all the page numbers will be represented accurately. HTML will look like this, where all the prose has been transcribed in Times New Roman with no representation of the layout of the original text, whereas PDFs, as I said, look like a direct photocopy of the original. Sometimes with web sources, you'll find that the paragraphs are actually numbered. Only use paragraph numbers if they are actually marked on the original document itself. Otherwise, they will not be reliable. You don't need to go through and count the paragraphs for yourself. But look and see if numbers are included. Then you can include those in your citation using the abbreviation para or paras. However, in the absence of reliable page numbers for the original material, MLA says to omit page references from the parenthetical citation altogether. Execute these strategies and you'll be using MLA style properly.